All right, for this exercise, we're going to be doing a frame of blue tape all the way around, just like you see there. And we're going to do a dividing line to divide this into half. Try and make sure that you divide it equally because we're going to be doing two painted acrylic gradients. And I know we've talked about gradients before, but this is going to be a little bit more difficult. Half of the gradient is going to be dedicated to one color scheme. The other half will be to another. So what I'd like you to pick is a complementary pair. So one half of the complementary pair goes to the left, the other half goes to the right. So I'm going to do red-orange, and across from red-orange on the color wheel is blue-green. There's other complementary pairs like orange and blue, yellow and violet, green and red, and additional ones as well. All right, so the first one we're going to do, I'm actually going to work on the right-hand side, should be more of a vertical gradient. That means it's going to be the darkest at the top, and then I want you to transition it to a lighter hue by the time it gets to the bottom of that frame. So we're going to treat this almost like you would paint a sky. In fact, we are going to be practicing painting a sky in a little bit, but for right now, you want to do short strokes. Think of vertical or X patterns. Just do not use horizontal strokes, and make sure, again, that you're going short. For this gradient, I want you to aim for about 5 or more different values. So up at the top there, it's pretty dark, kind of a turquoise color. Well, it's going to get incrementally lighter. You want to use a vertical stroke or kind of an X pattern, and you want to go short. So it's really important that one layer overlaps the other. If you don't do that, you're going to create striping on your surface. And it's also important that you layer more than once. So the striping kind of effect will be more noticeable on layer 1. By the time you get to layer 2, you can kind of smooth some of that out. And how do you avoid striping? Which striping is when you can see bands of color. You try and overlap your stroke, and you also have kind of a bridge color in between the two colors. So you try and get it to shift just ever so slightly to the next hue. So by the time I get to the bottom, it's kind of a minty, a little bit more yellow, greenish color here. And it looks one way with a single coat. It will look better with a second coat. You still want to apply kind of a thin coat, and by thin, I mean just thin paint application, no water on your brush. So you can have a little bit of water, but I almost always wring my brush out and I blot it on a paper towel. So here is layer 2. With a second layer, the paint should become more opaque. That means I can't see through it to the sheer white of the paper. The values, the darker hues, should be darker with the second coat. And you want to look for areas where it's kind of patchy, and you want to adjust it. Again, overlapping your stroke or having a few flickers of that color or value creep up into the other kind of value there would help. So you just want to smooth it out. So you get a smooth shift from one value to the next and on. It is trickier than you think. I always use really short strokes when I'm trying to switch between values. And I'm using a size 4 filbert brush. I think that's a perfect brush for this exercise. The filbert brush is a brush that has a slight curve to the point. It's not a round brush, but it has a slight curve to the flat edge of the brush. So again, our first gradient that we're going to do is just a vertical, darker on the top, and then progressively lighter as it goes towards the bottom. I'm also making it a little bit warmer at the bottom, so it has a little bit of yellow and orange in it, but still some of that blue turquoise mixture so that it harmonizes. And the goal is to try and get it to transition relatively smoothly. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want to get that separation between values to kind of go away, so it just fades one hue into the next hue without leaving a significant striping effect. At this point, I would call the blue-green gradient done. For the next one, I'd like you to go circular with your gradient. So it's a gradient that curves around, and you're going to kind of have to spiral in or spiral out to suggest kind of a round form. When you're doing this, you kind of want to think of Van Gogh's Starry Night, the way he paints stars and the rays of light that are emanating from those stars. So you really want to think curvy with your stroke and spiraling in or working your way out. Now you may be wondering, like, why so many gradients? Because we've done a gradient before when we were working with dry material, we were working with charcoal. Well, now it's in acrylic with color, and I'm having you do more gradients. The reason why is because you need that skill in order to paint representational art. And representational art is just art that looks like something you can easily recognize. So maybe that's a person's face, maybe it's a dog, maybe it's an apple or a peach. So you have to be able to shift and get gradients. There are gradients all around us because light makes gradients. So the sunshine will make a gradient. A lamp in your bedroom can cause a gradient to happen. So you want to be looking out for gradients in everyday life. So I'm just skipped ahead a little bit so you can see the radial gradient happening. You could continue curving your stroke all the way out to the edge of the frame, which is what I did. And I wanted it to seem like it was an actual egg or a sphere that was sitting on some sort of a ground plane, which is why I put in a cast shadow and a gray background. You don't necessarily have to do that, but I do need to see a shift of value. So it goes from one value, a darker value, into a lighter value. You can change the hue too. So like in the darker areas, I used some purple. In the lighter areas, it was more like pink and yellow. Once again, just remember when you're doing the circular gradient, make sure your stroke curves and wraps around that form. Short strokes, curvy, like a spiral, and that's how you're able to make it look like it has volume.